It's much more than that. This is really the establishment. However you want to name them, I use the name to describe the permanent power structure in Washington and New York that actually runs the country, that lobbies the congressmen and senators and offers them incentives to vote the way the real powers that you don't see behind the scenes want. You know, members of Congress and the House, they do have a high incumbency return rate. They all end up becoming very wealthy at one point, depending on how long they serve. But there still is a turnover, particularly in the House. And yet things don't seem to change. When I use shadow government here in these descriptions, I'm talking about Obama administration holdovers in what I call the deep state, which is these deeply invisible bureaucratic positions. People are there by virtue of appointment. They've never been elected. You don't know who they are. These are the people leaking. These are the people held over from the Obama administration. Then the Democrats are major players in the establishment. And the Republicans have their members, too. But the partisanship here exists. I mean, it is liberal versus conservative, left versus right. But the real thing happening here is a legitimate panic that they're feeling over the fact that Trump won. It's not that they were personally invested in Hillary Clinton. Very few people are. It's that Hillary's election meant business as usual. It meant that the establishment would continue to be the ruling class. There wouldn't be any opposition to worry about. And with Hillary there, they would be able to implement via Supreme Court nominations, appointments to various aspects of the bureaucracy, a permanent governing establishment in perpetuity. It would have been the end of any serious Republican opposition. The Republican Party, had this election gone the other way, would cease to exist. It would have imploded, and what would be happening today is everybody in it would be eating themselves, and it would have led to the creation of a new third party or replacement Republican. I'm firmly convinced of this, but all of this has been turned upside down with Trump's win. They didn't expect it. We know this. They believed their own polling. They believed their own version of common sense. They believed their own prejudicial, bigoted view of Trump. They believed that he had no prayer, no chance whatsoever. They think the majority of American people are a bunch of robot stooges that are not very bright, and it doesn't matter how bright they are because you don't have any power to stop these people anyway. So they're not really worried about you. And in fact, the more dependent you are, the better for them. The least productive you are, the less wealthy you are, the better for them. That's what was the status quo, and it was what they dreamed would continue. And they never thought Trump had a serious chance of winning, and so they never took the prospect seriously. They are in abject shock and anger and rage. They can't deal with what has happened. In their world, they were insulated from election results, meaning anything bad for them. I'm talking about the ruling class, the establishment. They are immune to the outcome of elections because they own politicians of both parties to implement whatever agenda, which is illustrated by the Republican Party not disagreeing with the Democrat Party, for example, on amnesty. They're all one party when it comes to comprehensive immigration reform, and that's because the ruling class wants it to be that way, and they provide the money. They find the donors. They are the donors. They find the fundraisers. They are the fundraisers. Anyway, all of this was turned upside down. Because what's funny, everything they're alleging here, the Democrats actually did it. Collusion to rig an election, the Democrats did it. One of the things going on here, I am convinced, is an effort to actually not cover up, but hide, to keep people from learning the details of how the Democrat primaries were actually rigged against Bernie Sanders. We've heard a little bit of it, but because the drive-bys never made a big deal of it because it didn't matter. Hillary was going to win anyway, no matter what. But they had to rig it. Bernie Sanders was the victim of a conspiracy at the DNC that made sure he never was going to win that nomination. And yet, who is it that's accusing somebody of rigging elections and working in silence and in private with the Russians to rig the election? Why, all of us is the hapless Republicans who can't shoot straight and can't get out of bed know what day it is. The Republicans working with Trump had this master plan working with the Russians to sabotage poor Hillary. When what really happened was Hillary and her private server that she was selling access to her future presidency. It's another thing they didn't want anybody to find out about. That's what the whole purpose of Clinton Foundation was. You've noticed it's shut down now since there's no reason to accept bribes. So they've shut it down because Hillary doesn't have the power to provide access to any of these people that were giving gorbs and gorbs of money to their foundation. I mean, everything has just been turned upside down. And what they are alleging that Trump and the Republicans did are actually things they did or have done. So it is a situation here where they are engaged in an effort to reverse what happened. Now, they can't redo the election, and they can't put Hillary in the Oval Office. They can't do that. What they think they can do is get rid of everybody important to Trump, and maybe even get rid of him. You're saying, well, yeah, but that would leave him with Pence. Yeah, but they think they can handle Pence. Pence is a Republican. He's not an outsider like Trump. Nobody's like Trump. Once they get rid of Trump, they get rid of the opposition. That's what they're thinking. You get rid of Trump and you get rid of the guts, the courage, and to a certain extent, you can understand them thinking that way. Name any other Republican that's ever run up against him. And you can't. So in their minds, get rid of Trump, get rid of his closest advisors. And the effort to make this possible was all put in place after the election by Obama and his allies in the deep state, and the Democrats and the media are now executing the establishment plan to bring about precisely that. It doesn't matter to them whether any of this is true or not. That is of no concern whatsoever. The only thing that matters is what they can convince people they have the power to do. They have just demonstrated that they, even though they lost the election, and even though they have lost 1,200 seats, somehow they still have the power to effectively get rid of an attorney general. They got rid of Bush's attorney general, Alberto Gonzales, the same way. He was even Hispanic. They're demonstrating they were able to get rid of Trump's number one choice at national security, Mike Flynn. Now they're attacking Trump's closest advisor, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, on the same pretext that he met with the Russian ambassador. And you know what that means? Since the Russians are working with Trump to screw Hillary's election, that means Jared Kushner is guilty. Which is another point. Everybody here is guilty. The New York Times is clearly implying, and you as readers are to infer, Trump's guilty, Putin's guilty, Kushner's guilty, Sessions is guilty, Flynn was guilty, Bannon's going to end up being guilty. It's all, we just haven't found the evidence yet. We're looking, and there'll be further leaks that will allow the media to say, and yet another treasure trove of information has just reached us here at the New York Times, and it'll be nothing. It will never be evidence because there isn't any, because every bit of this is fake news. So it's a silent coup that is taking place.